Hello and welcome back to the channel, welcome back to another video. This one is player rankings for game week 35 with myself and George from Ingenuity Fantasy, which if you don't know about Ingenuity Fantasy, do check them out. The link is in the description. It's ingenuityfantasy.com. All sorts of good stuff on there. They've got match stats from Opta, they've got articles on captaincy, differentials from various different people. They have a transfer wizard, which is a really cool feature where you put in the position you need and how much you've got to spend, and it will give you a ordered list of players to consider. And then there's the player rankings, which myself and George will be talking about today, which 6 categories. Each myself and George have made a list of our top 10 players in each category. So you've got budget defenders, premium defenders, budget mids, premium mids, budget forwards and premium forwards. So let's get into it.
Hi guys, welcome back to another edition of FPL Player Rankings with myself and Brad. As always, we will get started straight away with the cheap defenders. Now, not a huge amount of movement on the cheap defender side. A lot of people will have had cheap defenders who bagged in free hit. As far as which ones to move forward with, there is definitely some stuff up for discussion. So we will start, I guess, with Sessegnon. Sessegnon, the last 6 weeks, if you've owned him at any point, for 4.1 million, that sort of output is absolutely unbelievable. Can you see it continuing?
I mean, yeah, I guess so I was on free hit last week and I was not sure whether I was going to include him on my free hit team in the end, but I did. Mainly because Fulham do have some attackers back now, so that kind of left wing spot that he was playing isn't necessarily just going to be his. But we did see Anthony Robinson not feature at all in the last game against Southampton, so potentially we could see Sessegnon just at left back, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Yes, it makes him not as good an option, but I don't mind their fixtures, and he's so cheap that it won't matter. He's up to 4.2 now, but still very good value.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. If as you say, if their attackers were coming back, and you're talking about a 4.7, 4.8 million sort of player, then it's up for conversation whether you keep him in. If he gets moved back to defence, or if he even risks being benched. But at that price, for that ceiling, it is just worth the risk every single time. So yeah, I think don't overthink Sessegnon. Don't overthink all of that, because it's such a low risk, high reward play. And then so I guess a lot of people are thinking about where to move cheap defenders, trying to close out the season. Me and Brad are both quite keen on Everton, but I think it may not even be an Everton defender that's the best pick. You're thinking maybe Pickford.
Yeah, I mean, if you are in the market for a goalkeeper, then Pickford is for sure the one. I mean, there'll be people that have Raya and no other goalkeeper. That could be a situation where you do want to move a goalkeeper on. Raya probably does play games, Premier League games, but if there is a team that's going to rotate, it's Arsenal. So, yeah. And if you haven't got any other option apart from Raya, then maybe it's worth the transfer. And yeah, Everton defence, or Everton players in general, the forwards and midfielders are a bit harder to kind of get an idea on who's going to play, but defenders, Pickford, Mikalenko, O'Brien, Braithwaite, all very good options. It's Ipswich at home, then Fulham away, then Southampton at home, then Newcastle away on the final day. But it's a very nice run of fixtures.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just those Ipswich and then fixtures being half of your remaining fixtures, and both at home.
Yeah,
automatically catapult your defence into consideration. So given how cheap their defenders are, if you are looking for a budget option to round out the season with, I think it's an excellent direction to go, especially considering some of the other teams with great fixtures to end the season, like your Forests and your Cities, and your Brentfords. Brentford tend to leak goals, and they don't really have standout defenders to go for. City's are kind of expensive as a Forest, so Everton provide that nice sort of middle ground between a more reliably defensive team than a Brentford, but still having those excellent fixtures. So yeah, definitely a good way to end the season. And then so another interesting sort of area that I see a lot of people umming and ahhing on is Kivior. I've personally never owned Kivior. I think there's just been a bit too much uncertainty around the Champions League and when he's going to play. What would you recommend as far as Kivior goes?
Well, yeah, I do actually own Kivior, so I am kind of in the position where I do have to think about it. He's only really on this list because of a lack of other options more than anything. I mean, yes, I could have put someone like Konza or Collins in, who are kind of safer for starts, but I do think if Kivior starts all the games, then he's great. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, we know he's the first choice defender now with Saliba as the centre backs, but that most likely does mean that he won't play all the league games. So yeah, I mean,
or at least all the minutes,
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, so it's just whether it's worth selling him or not, and whether you've got other kind of problems. For me, I've got four other defenders that play and are quite good, so I won't be selling him this week. I can quite easily bench him this week. So yeah, he's probably not worth a transfer out if you've got other defenders, to be honest. You've only got a handful of transfers left this season, so you're better off, if you can, using them in the midfield and forward areas.
Yeah. And, I think if Arsenal had more inspiring fixtures, then I think, it makes more sense as a player. But, they've got Bournemouth, Liverpool and Newcastle in their next three. Granted, they've got Southampton on the final game of the season. But, those three fixtures alone, when Arsenal's focus is elsewhere, it's probably not the best time to invest in them.
Yeah.
But if you already have them, it's probably not the best time to buy them. Sorry.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. You wouldn't be buying right now, but you could probably get away with holding.
Yeah, exactly. So that actually leads us quite nicely onto the premium defenders. Now, again, not a huge amount of movement this week. But I think one interesting talking point, I mean, just because of, how sensational he was on free hit for a lot of people, is Trippier. Now, a lot of people will have seen that and be considering, bringing in Trippier for the rest of the season. Newcastle's fixtures aren't horrible, Brighton, Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton, but they are also not great. So yeah, where do you land on Trippier for the end of the season?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, you can see he's not in my list.
Yeah.
So I'm not that high on him really. I had him on my free hit. I was very high on Newcastle players last week, and to be honest, have been for a while. But if you look back at the results for Newcastle in the last, say, 10, 12 games, all of the fixtures they've done well in are good fixtures. Like, they've lost. Not even that. I'm going to say you. You've lost against Liverpool. You've lost against City. You've lost against Aston Villa away. All the other games you've had are very good fixtures. Ipswich at home, Crystal Palace at home, Man United at home, Leicester away, Brentford at home, West Ham away. And I'm just not seeing good enough fixtures to end the season to warrant many Newcastle players, really.
Yeah, and it's completely fair. I think part of the main struggle for it is, we are up against Brighton and Chelsea, for example, in our next two, both of which are fighting for European spots. So we don't even have the luxury of playing like an already relegated team or a mid-table team who has nothing to play for. We're going to be playing teams who are going to be, putting out their strongest 11 and giving it their all. So yeah, I think defensively, I'm not definitely too assured about Newcastle, but I think, given he's a set piece taker on a pretty good attacking team, there will always be a pretty decent floor. So he's definitely not a sell if you have him. He's definitely not wasting a sell transfer on at all. But yeah, just there is a little bit of risk about buying him at the moment because, as Brad says, the fixtures. Now, another one, speaking of fixtures, someone Brad has got on his list who he's been absolutely yo-yoing up this list for us all season, and that's Cucurella. Now, Chelsea's fixtures, Liverpool, Newcastle, United and Forest are far from ideal. So yeah, the Cucurella inclusion.
Yeah, maybe I'm spinning a narrative here, but I don't hate them fixtures, which is weird to say given that I just said I don't like Newcastle's fixtures, and on paper they don't look too dissimilar. But Liverpool at home this week is potentially not as bad a fixture as it could be. Liverpool have now won the league. They have absolutely nothing to play for. So that fixture isn't as bad as it could have been a week ago or 2 weeks ago. Don't get me wrong, Liverpool are still great and Chelsea aren't great at the moment. But Man United at home in game week 37, another fantastic fixture. Man United are struggling, well, not just to score goals, they're just struggling at football. Newcastle and Forest aren't the best fixtures, don't get me wrong, but I don't think the fixtures are as bad as they look on paper, and Cucurella has a decent amount of attacking threat that could make him worth it. Again, I'm not sure. Not loads of these defender options are going to really be viable because I don't think that many people are going to be using their limited free transfers on defenders. But yeah, I don't mind Cucurella.
I just think it's, he's pretty similar to Trippier in the sense that they have bad fixtures. They're both quite leaky at the back. They both provide good attacking output. So I think that's where the sort of main disparity or sort of question marks for me arise. Granted, Cucurella has done it on been a bit more consistent, and Newcastle have struggled a bit more against big teams. But yeah, I don't know. Me personally, I think, I doubt anyone has Cucurella. Doubt many people even have Cucurella. But I think, given their fixtures anyway, and given some of the fixtures that other teams have, I just think you probably don't want to be buying Chelsea players at the moment, Chelsea defenders at the moment. I think it's quite risky business.
And again, I mean, not many of these players are players that I'd be looking to buy. To be honest, the options aren't great. You're looking at like the top 3 or 4 maybe. Besides that, you're not really looking to buy any of these guys, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. So, that leads us quite nicely onto City. As far as premium defenders go, you are pretty much looking at just City. You can look at Forest, but because Nico Williams exists, because Murillo exists, you probably don't need to splash the extra on Aina or Milenkovic. But City is a different story, and Gvardiol in particular. If you don't have Trent, or Trent is, out of your price range, which you probably will be for a lot of people, the best player to just ride until the end of the season, I think Gvardiol's upside is fantastic.
Yeah, massive. I mean, yeah, they're playing this situation where he's playing as a kind of more defensive left centre-back, but it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all, to be honest. He's the most nailed City defender, probably the most nailed City player, to be honest, in general. Yeah. So 6.3 million, is a fair amount. It's quite a lot, but it's worth it given their fixtures.
Yeah, I mean, the fixture is just fantastic. Even though he is playing that left centre-back position, we've seen how often he'll just pick up the ball and just go on absolute walkabouts into, opposition territory, be it from left-back or be it from centre-back. So, the attacking threat, kind of regardless of where he is on the pitch, will always be there, but just because he likes going adventuring. I think City probably the way to go. Gvardiol the way to go, and then Forest pretty much till the end of the season, really. Just on that side, just quickly while we're talking about teams to the end of the season, you probably don't touch any Brentford defenders. I know they're more in the cheapest section, but just while we're talking about fixtures to the end of the season.
Yeah, the fixtures are great, and we will be talking about Brentford players in the next 2 sections. But defenders wise, I don't think I'd bother personally.
Yeah, completely agree. Cool. So that rounds out the defenders section. Let us know what you think of our list. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again for the midfielders. Right. Welcome back to the midfielder segment. We will get started straight away with cheap mids. You will notice a certain someone is still at the top of my list. Now, granted, he is ripe for rotation, but there has been news that Gordon's injury is just still bothering him a bit. So I think we can probably rely on Barnes' minutes for at least the next few games. And, when he does play, he is so dangerous and so direct. I think that's probably why he's still at the top of mine.
Yeah, I do agree that when he does play, he is very, very dangerous. I did mention in the defenders that I'm not keen on Newcastle's fixtures. I'm slightly more keen on them from an attacking perspective than I am from a defensive perspective. But for me, there's just too much. Given the kind of pool we're looking at, it's not like the defenders where the pool is rubbish. Like the budget midfielders pool is stacked. Given that it is so stacked, there's too much uncertainty around minutes for me to put him high. But I do get if you back his minutes, then he should be high up this list for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's all it is for me. I mean, if you are in a position where you've got pretty good cover in midfield or up front, then I think just because of where his ceiling is, he's definitely worth the risk. But if you're struggling for transfers or you've got to take some people out, then he's definitely not. He might just be a tad risky in that sense, but. Yeah, again, he's a high risk, high reward play, like he was last week. You pretty much know what you're getting with him at this point. And speaking of people you normally know what you're getting from them, Kluivert and Semenyo. Now, we've seen them all season. They were very consistent. They've been in and amongst it. Semenyo, for me, I think has come onto his own. Come into his own a bit. Of late, but it seems like at the moment they can't both. There isn't enough to go around for them both. It's either Semenyo sort of picks it up or Kluivert picks it up. So I think that's where it's at for me. But I don't know what you think on that.
Yeah, I kind of somewhat agree. I think at the moment, like you say, the pie isn't that big, given that they're not like bagging 3-4 goals every game, which is just why I back the penalty taker in that situation, more than anything. Yeah. They're both at the top. They're both 1 and 2, so I think they're both absolutely great. Even though the fixtures don't look great, I still think they're very, very good options. The thing is, though, the worst fixture on their list is this week, which is Arsenal away. On paper, terrible fixture, but we're going to see at least 8 changes from that Arsenal team.
Yeah,
it's not going to be your first team Arsenal team, so I don't hate that as a fixture as much as the kind of fixture difficulty thing suggests.
Yeah. It's a very good point, and I think that's that's why we saw quite a few people actually bringing in Kluivert not too long ago. So it's one of those ones where the positions and the fixtures, as you say with the Arsenal one, they are there. I just think we're kind of waiting for Bournemouth to kick back into life.
Yeah.
At the minute, it seems like they're just kind of just plateauing a bit. But as the second that we see Bournemouth go on like a 3 or 4 goal romp, I think both of those guys are just in for multiple returns. So that is why, they just can be so dangerous, and I think that's why, they're definitely at the top of Brad's list. Now, another interesting one who has crept his way in, and no doubt here on Brad's list because of their excellent fixtures, is Sharda. We've seen him actually chip in with a goal every now and then. I think every Mbuemo and Wissa owner earlier in the season, they'd see Brentford goal and then they'd be like, "Oh, damn it was Sharda." And I think that's where he found himself popping up quite a lot, but. He's proven to be not a bad option then.
Yeah, well, it's a bit of a weird one. So he's the classic fixtures over form in that he hasn't got an attacking return since game week 25. So it's been about 10 game weeks since he's actually got a return. But in that time, his minutes have been fantastic. The last 6 games, the least he's played is 85 minutes. So his minutes are unbelievable. Brentford's fixtures are unbelievable. He just needs to actually get amongst the returns, which I guess that is the reason he's so much cheaper than the likes of Mbeumo and Wissa, because he is involved less. But 5.1 million for Sharda, given that we're late in the season, so you're only going to need him. Well, you're only going to be able to use him for 4 game weeks, and those fixtures are Man United at home, Ipswich away, Fulham at home, Wolves away. Unbelievable. And you're getting a player who's going to probably start every game in a front three. The returns haven't been there, but I'd be surprised if he didn't get some returns in those 4 fixtures.
Yeah, and as we've seen with Brentford before, Brentford, especially against weaker opposition, the pie, we'd use the pie analogy, but it works perfectly. The pie is absolutely massive. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the league, and when they're playing bad teams, there is often 3-4 goals to go around. So I think that now more than ever, the pie has swelled to a point where Sharda is definitely a viable option.
No, there'll be a lot of people that are in a situation where they've got players that are cheap and they can't get to Mbeumo. Sharda is a genuine budget option if you can't get to Mbeumo.
Yeah, exactly. He's a great way into that, because Mbeumo's price has actually gone quite high now. Mm-hmm. So Sharda there's quite a substantial gap. So Sharda definitely a good enabler there. And then another player I want to talk about. So, we mentioned earlier that fixtures aren't great, and I think we probably need to wait and see based on some of the Partey injury news. That's Trossard. Now, for me, Trossard potentially, has capacity to get a lot of those up top minutes for Arsenal. Now, will they rotate Merino in there? Maybe. Will Trossard, get the bulk of the minutes there instead? Maybe. We don't really know, but I think just the potential of him, getting those minutes, and when he does play, we even saw against PSG. Trossard does find himself making those runs in behind. He does have a sort of knack for goal. So, yeah, I think that's the only reason he's there for me. But you'd maybe exercise a bit of caution.
Yeah, it's really difficult with players like Trossard, Merino, Martinelli. All the Arsenal guys are really tough to kind of judge right now, because it doesn't really matter if they're part of their best 11 at this point. It might even be better if they're not part of the best 11 for the next 2 games at least, because they're going to play their best team. Well, they played their best team against PSG. They're going to play their best team against PSG next week. If Partey is out, that probably does mean Merino in centre mid, which means that there's a spot up top for grabs, and the only real player that can fill that is probably Trossard, maybe Martinelli, but then Trossard would be on the left anyway. When he does play, he's great. Like Ipswich, we saw he got 2 goals. Crystal Palace, he got a goal. It's just whether he'll get those minutes. Over the last kind of week or so, Ipswich he played 84 minutes. Against Palace he played 90 minutes. Against PSG he played 90 minutes. If there's anyone that is due for a rest, it's him. It's just whether they can actually afford to rest him or not. So yeah, that's all it is. The minutes are so uncertain. But if you do get minutes from him, then he's very likely to get returns.
Exactly, which is why so much of this, probably hinges on the Partey news. Because, if Partey is injured and is going to miss a decent amount of time, then Trossard is a great option, because Merino naturally will come back into midfield to cover. But, if Partey is fit, then, we might see Merino back up front, and then, Trossard rotated again. So it's very, there's a lot of different moving parts with, Trossard and Merino as assets. So it's definitely a sort of wait and see how they shake out. And then another player I want to show some love to. I've owned him recently and, haven't moved off him. He's been a very loyal servant. And that's Morgan Rogers. And I think in no small part, that is down to Aston Villa having brilliant fixtures to end the season. They've got Fulham at home, then they've got Bournemouth, and then they've got Spurs and United. And, given all of, the rotations, and, different midfielders chopping and changing, the one mainstay, the one absolutely reliable, nailed player is always going to be Morgan Rogers, and he's always in amongst it.
Yeah, his minutes have just defied what anybody thought was going to be possible. Like every time you think that he should get rested this game, he just doesn't. And all of the last 4 weeks he's returned, none of them have been like huge. It's a 10, a 9, a 6 and a 7, but still for 5.7 million now, it's ridiculous value.
Yeah, exactly. And he has been that all season.
Yeah.
So it's not even like there's a risk here. If you've got 5.7 million in your team and you're looking for some safe points and some decent some safe minutes, even with some decent fixtures from a player can return, Morgan Rogers is pretty much exactly what he says on the tin. So yeah, just a great option really. But then moving on to a slightly more riskier asset. So Dango. Now, Dango is a very interesting one because he has started quite a few games in a row now. Albeit we did just mention that Bournemouth's attack is kind of lacking that potency, but we have seen what he can do earlier in the season.
Yeah, we did potentially think that Evanilson was going to be banned, meaning that we'd see Dango up front again. But Evanilson's ban has been rescinded. Regardless, Dango's still been getting good minutes, and because he was owned so heavily before, and now a lot of people have sold him, he's down to 4.7 million, which is just stupid value, absolutely stupid. So if Bournemouth do turn it on, like we know they're capable of doing, then he is ridiculous value.
Yeah, exactly. 4.7 million is absolutely crazy. Now going to the complete other end of the spectrum, the premium midfielders, you will notice I have docked Palmer quite low, and I would love to say that that's not an emotional decision, but it is. I held him for quite long, and I'm absolutely sick of him now. So he can deal with that.
He has been frustrating. I own him in my team, and I used my free hit last week, and I still had him on free hit, which was really annoying. But I don't know. I just can't come round to the idea that him and Chelsea are just really bad now. In fact, even if I've watched, granted, sometimes he hasn't really looked great, and neither of Chelsea, but sometimes I've watched them and he is involved still. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think he is a bad option now. I don't really blame the people. I don't really blame the people that are selling him, and I do kind of get there'll be people in the situation where you've got Palmer, you haven't got Mbeumo. That seems like that could be a good move this week. So I wouldn't begrudge people for making that move. I just don't think that he is that bad of an option. For me, all three of those top guys in my list, Salah, Palmer and Mbeumo, I think it's very, very close between all of them right now. I think Mbeumo could genuinely be number one in that list. I've got him at 3, but it's so close that there's a world where he could be top.
I think for me, it's kind of Salah and Mbeumo in their own tier, and then it's not. I know what Palmer is, but at this point, it's been so long that I need something to make me believe again, because otherwise he is just going to find himself, tumbling down the list. I've actually seen quite a lot of Man United fans doing quite funny posts about the best Premier League one season wonders ever, and there's like Michu, and then there's Cole Palmer. He's catching a lot of that stick at the moment, but he's frustrating to own for sure. Which actually leads quite nicely onto Saka. Now, both frustrating for their own reasons. Saka, I think a lot of people had Saka triple captain against Ipswich, not too long ago, and the minutes were there, the chances were there, and he just didn't return. But now we're seeing him potentially being rotated again, given the Champions League. But would you ever move from Palmer to Saka or Saka to Palmer, or if let's say you have Mbeumo already, what do you do with that other spot?
It's tough if you've already got Mbeumo. If you've got Saka and no Mbeumo, then I would sell Saka to Mbeumo. I'd find that transfer much easier than Palmer to Mbeumo personally. But you say he got the minutes. He only got 86 over 2 games in the double game week, and I think that was always potentially likely as well. I don't think we'll see him get good enough minutes in this game or potentially the next game either, given that that's after the PSG game. So I just don't think you can trust him. And I think that if you haven't got Mbeumo, then it is, for me, that is actually quite an easy move, I think. If you do already have Mbeumo, then I don't even hate a guy that we're going to talk about in a second, Bowen now.
Yeah.
I mean, I was against Bowen, don't get me wrong, but I don't hate a Saka to Bowen move even.
Yeah, so I mean, this is what I was going to talk to you about. So, I mean, you've been, slandering West Ham, to put it generously, all year. I mean, I guess also, I mean, he also finds himself quite high through lack of other great options. But I mean, West Ham's fixtures are pretty good. Spurs, United, and Ipswich. I mean, there's a lot to like there.
The fixtures are so good. Like, you can't really. I mean, Spurs at home, which could probably be a rotated Spurs team as well, given that they're in the middle of two European games with nothing to play for in the league.
United as well, yeah.
And then United the week after, and then it's Forest at home, Ipswich away. The fixtures are so good. Everything else is there to like about Bowen as well, really. Like, he gets great minutes. He's on penalties, probably. The problem is that, West Ham are still really, really bad. But it doesn't really seem to matter. I mean, he still kind of ticks along with returns. I mean, the last few weeks, we're talking 9, 9, 2, 7, 2, 5, 2, 6, 10. Like, he just gets returns regardless.
Yep.
So I do like him now. I've come around to the idea of it just because the fixtures are too good.
Did you move from Saka to Bowen?
100%. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the way to go, but not from like a Palmer to Bowen.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't begrudge anyone for doing it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
To be honest, but I don't know. I don't think I'll.
I am personally considering that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I've got
So
Palmer already.
I've got Palmer. I've got neither Bowen nor Mbeumo. For me, myself, I'll probably just keep Palmer, but that's probably because I rate Palmer higher than most people do. If you really want to get rid of Palmer and you've got Mbeumo, then I don't mind Palmer to Bowen either.
Yeah, agreed. So that rounds out the midfielders section. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again for the forwards. Right. And welcome back to the forward segment. We will get started straight away with the cheap forwards. So, I mean, a bit of news. So, following the red card, a lot of people thought Evan Nilsson would be out. He has since had his red card rescinded. So, he returns to the top of our lists. Just because he's returned to the top of our lists, it's quite tricky what the front three at the moment would be, because you'd think Wissa and then like an Isak or a Marmoush, but where do you think Evan Nilsson is viable at the moment?
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah, to be fair, I think I do. I mean, if you're, not many people are, but let's say you're on wildcard. Well, there are a few people on wildcard 35, I guess. I think Wissa is someone that's definitely in your team. I think Watkins is probably someone that's definitely in your team who we'll get onto.
Yeah.
Not sure the third who I'd go with, but yeah, I do think Evan Nilsson is up there in terms of players that you would go for. I think just mainly because that I back Bournemouth, as I kind of talked about in the budget forward section. I do think Bournemouth will just get back to scoring kind of multiple goals each game. So if you can get a piece of that, and Evan Nilsson is sometimes on penalties, I guess, potentially when Cliver's off the pitch or a random one, he's sometimes on penalties. And I just like Bournemouth, and that means that I like Evan Nilsson for that reason.
Yeah, he also operates with a really high sort of expected goal involvement. I mean, he's operating at sort of like 0.6 level, which for context, you've got Cunha's down there at 0.4s and stuff like that. So, he's in and around all the right areas all the time. I think he's probably not as talented finisher, as talented in the final third as Cunha, but the positions he's getting himself into, based on those figures alone, he's, definitely in the conversation. Now, another player who, was quite hot earlier in the season, Welbeck. Now, he's an interesting one because Brighton are an interesting one, and that's pretty much how I land on it. He's always been cheap. Yeah, where do you land on Welbeck? It's an interesting.
Yeah, I like him. You don't really know what you're going to get from Brighton week on week, but I do like the fact that for the next 2 games at least, he is nailed. Like João Pedro is suspended for the next 2 games. So Welbeck will start, will get good minutes, will probably be on penalties. I think that that's enough to have him high in this list, given that the other options aren't great. That's all there is to it, really, for me.
Yeah, I mean, hard to argue with that, to be fair. Then another budget option that I've definitely earlier in the season talked quite a bit of smack about him, and that is Strand Larsen. But it's very hard to argue with 6 goals in 6 games, and a lot of those with Cunha on the field as well.
Yeah, I do mainly think that was probably down to the thing that we say about Wolves quite a lot. When they have good fixtures, they play well. When they don't, they don't. And they've had most of their really good fixtures now. And they've just had a run of... we talked about it ages ago, but this run was a joke. Fulham, Everton, Southampton, West Ham, Ipswich, Tottenham, United, Leicester. Stupendous run. Now they're coming into City, Brighton, Palace, Brentford. So after the City game, it's not horrendous, but it's certainly not as good as it has been. So that's why I've got him a little bit lower. But he's very cheap, so can't really knock it.
I think Wolves, it's worth mentioning, Wolves are currently, in the last 6 games, the most informed team in Europe, in Europe's top 5 leagues. They've won 6 on the bounce. So, even if, you do expect them to only play well against lesser opposition, it's hard to argue with how much momentum they are carrying into, those sort of middle of the line fixtures. So, I think just because of that situation and that momentum, we could definitely see some returns from Strand Larsen in those 4. Now moving on to Brad's favourite FPL player, actually, cannot stop saying enough about him, and that is Raul. Now, Raul back in the Fulham fold, given Muniz is injured. I'm assuming he's going straight in your team.
The thing is, I can't really know when Muniz is out. I actually can't knock him. He's just a good option, but as I proved earlier in the season, when they're both fit, Raul is far from nailed like everybody randomly seems to think he is. I even went to the extent of predicting when he'd get his benches. So, yeah, when they're both fit, Raul's not an option in my opinion. But Muniz is out for the next few weeks at least, I think. So, yeah, you can't really knock it now. He's just a good option now that he is going to get good minutes. He's very cheap. I think he's 5.3 million, and he is on penalties. So nothing not to like about him now.
Yeah, except for sort of how we know he can be. I mean, Fulham are just missing so many attackers at the moment. It's hard to see him get rotated out. Now on to premium forwards, where I think it's a tiny bit more interesting. Just for a couple of reasons. The first one that we want to start with is Watkins. Now, we spoke earlier about Rodgers and how fantastic Aston Villa's fixtures are. And, we've said there's such a high potency attack, but the main problem was not knowing who's going to start. Anyone not called Rodgers was not nailed. But with Rashford now out for the season, Watkins is just a fantastic option.
Yeah, very good option. And to be honest, now that I'm looking at my list, I think I could have put him higher. I've got him at 3. I think he potentially should have been higher in my list. But yeah, very, very good option. It's Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Tottenham at home, Man United away. The fixtures are so good. He's going to get great minutes now. There's really nothing not to like about him.
Yeah, exactly. And they're chasing that Champions League spot. They're right in the thick of having a lot to play for. So, it'll be best 11 every time. They won't be changing out Watkins for someone getting a Make-A-Wish run up top for a bit. It just will be Watkins. So definitely as much as I've trusted his minutes ever right now. And then Another one, speaking of, I mean, sort of his main rival for number 2 on the list now, and that's Marmoush. Now, I mean, we spoke about Villa having great fixtures. The reason we've got Marmoush as high as we do is because City also have fantastic fixtures. The only slight concern about Marmoush is Haaland coming back.
Yeah, so I think I might have read that Haaland's back in training. I'm not sure how reliable that is, but there was murmurings of it last week as well. So I think it is close if he isn't already back. So yeah, I mean, this week, it's very unlikely Haaland will just get a random start this week, I would imagine. So you're probably fine for this Wolves at home fixture. But you might need to at least have a plan to deal with Marmoush potentially in the near future. I mean, next week is Southampton they play, I believe. So, yeah, it's a tough one. You're going to want City players for that game, but if Marmoush's minutes are looking potentially a little bit ropey, then it is something you might need to address. Although, when Haaland was fit, Marmoush was still playing football. It's not like it was a one or the other situation every week. So, you could be fine regardless.
Yeah, so, the insurance that he will play is still there. But, if Haaland comes back and Marmoush isn't, the main focal point of their attack, you might see him slip, below your Watkins and your Woods and your Cunhas. Because, as we mentioned before, City, Villa, Forest, all fantastic fixtures right up until the end of the season. Which again leads me, so a lot of people, again, leads on to this point about Wolves. Now, Cunha, you've got a 6. I think it's for the exact reason that we don't trust their fixtures. But Cunha by himself, I think I just have more belief in Wolves. And I think it's not even too complex. I think where me and Brad stand on this. If you have Cunha, he's not worth the transfer out. If you don't have him, there's better options.
I'm not even sure I agree with that.
You transfer him out.
If you don't have Wissa and you have Cunha, I think that could be.
Yeah, it depends on your other strikers, actually. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at Wolves, they're the most predictable team. They started the season with Arsenal, Chelsea, Forest, Newcastle, Villa, Liverpool, Brentford, City. They didn't win a game until game week 11 when they played Southampton. Yeah. They then had a few good games and got some wins. They then played Forest, Newcastle, Chelsea, Arsenal, Villa, Liverpool. They lost 5 out of those 6. They then, in the last 6 weeks, won 6 in a row against Southampton, West Ham, Ipswich, Tottenham, Man United, Leicester. They have good fixtures, they win. They have bad fixtures, they lose. It is simple, and I'm back in the pattern.
The most predictable team, yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially all it is. I'm back in that pattern, and admittedly their fixtures aren't horrendous, so it's not like they're playing it's not like they've got City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Newcastle or something. But I think their fixtures are bad enough to know that they're not going to keep winning like this.
Yeah, I think we're literally glass half full and glass half empty on these final games, because they're all, are they at? This is the level that this is the actual grey area of where they are. Those final 3 games. It could be any result. So yeah, that rounds out the forward segment and indeed the video. Let us know what you think of our lists. Let us know if there's anyone we missed, and we will see you again next week.
And that's all for this one. Like I said, do check out ingenuityfantasy.com. The link is in the description. All sorts of good stuff on there. But that is all for this one. So if you liked it, do hit like, do subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.